The moment my wife Olivia slipped off her wedding ring and tossed it carelessly onto our marble bathroom counter, I knew our 15-year marriage was about to become something else entirely. Something uglier. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "It doesn't match my dress," she said, admiring herself in our full-length mirror. The black cocktail dress hugged her still impressive figure, and the diamond necklace I'd bought her for our anniversary caught the light perfectly. But the wedding ring, the one I'd saved 3 months' salary to buy when we were young and broke, apparently clashed with her aesthetic. "Sure," I muttered from the doorway of our upscale Boston brownstone bedroom, watching her apply lipstick with practiced precision. "And my loyalty doesn't match your boyfriend's cologne." She didn't hear me, or pretended not to. Olivia had perfected the art of selective hearing over the past 6 months, ever since she'd started working late 3 nights a week and coming home smelling like expensive aftershave that definitely wasn't mine. My name is Daniel Reid, and I'm 45 years old. I run a mid-sized tech consulting firm that I built from nothing after college. I'm not particularly handsome, average height, brown hair going gray at the temples, the kind of guy who blends into crowds at corporate mixers. For 15 years, that had been enough for Olivia. Apparently, it wasn't anymore. "I'll be late tonight," she said, checking her phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. "The fashion corporate event is running until at least midnight." "Which event is that again?" I asked, though I'd memorized every detail of her increasingly elaborate lies. "The one I told you about, with the investors from Milan." She didn't even look at me as she lied. "Sasha thinks we might land the European expansion deal." Sasha Morrison, her best friend and business partner at their luxury fashion consulting firm. Another piece of work who'd never liked me, though she'd tolerated me well enough when I was paying for their girls' trips to Napa Valley. Right. The Milan investors. I leaned against the doorframe, studying my wife's face in the mirror. "At the Orion Hotel, I assume." That got her attention. Her hand froze halfway to her purse, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Fear? Guilt? It was gone too quickly to tell. "How did you—" "Yes, the Orion. Their conference facilities are excellent." I nodded slowly. The Orion Hotel, where she'd been charging rooms to our joint credit card twice a week for the past month. Always the same suite. Always under my name, which I'd thought was odd until I realized it was probably easier than explaining to her lover why she was paying for their romantic rendezvous. "Have fun," I said. She kissed my cheek, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like a business transaction than affection, and click-clacked her way downstairs in heels that cost more than most people's rent. I heard the front door close, followed by the purr of her BMW pulling out of our driveway. I waited exactly 10 minutes, then got in my own car and followed her. The Orion Hotel squatted like a glass and steel monument to excess in downtown Boston's financial district. I parked across the street and watched Olivia hand her keys to the valet with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. She walked through the lobby like she owned the place, past the bar where actual business meetings happened, straight to the elevator bank that led to the premium suites. I didn't need to follow her upstairs. I already knew where she was going, and more importantly, who she was meeting. Marcus Lane, 38 years old, rising star in luxury branding, with the kind of sharp jawline and expensive suits that made middle-aged women forget they had husbands at home. I'd met him twice at industry mixers, where he'd given me the kind of handshake that was just firm enough to avoid being insulting, while making it clear he considered me beneath his notice. Apparently, my wife disagreed with his assessment. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching the hotel entrance and thinking about the wedding ring sitting on our bathroom counter. 15 years of marriage, reduced to an accessory that didn't match her dress. The symbolism was so heavy-handed, it would have been laughable if it weren't destroying my life. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Event running even later than expected. Don't wait up. I typed back, no problem. Sleep well. Then I drove home, walked upstairs to our bedroom, and picked up her wedding ring. It was a simple platinum band with a modest diamond. Nothing flashy, but solid and real. Unlike our marriage, apparently. I slipped it into my pocket and went to my home office. If Olivia thought she could play games, she was about to discover that her mild-mannered tech consultant husband had learned a few tricks over the years. I'd built my business by being smarter than my competitors, more thorough in my research, and absolutely ruthless when someone tried to screw me over. Time to apply those skills to my personal life. I started with our joint accounts, not to steal anything, but to understand exactly how long this had been going on. The hotel charges went back 3 months, expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, charges at lingerie boutiques and jewelry stores. She'd been building a whole separate life with my money, probably laughing about it with Sasha over their weekly brunches. Next, I pulled up her location history from our shared phone plan. The pattern was clear. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times, her phone pinged from the Orion Hotel for exactly 3 hours. Never longer, never shorter. Efficient adultery, scheduled around her real life like a dentist appointment. The most damning evidence came from her credit card statements. She'd been buying gifts, expensive ones, a watch that cost more than my car payment, cologne that probably explained the unfamiliar scent I'd been smelling on her clothes, a leather jacket that definitely wasn't in my closet. By 3 a.m, I had a complete picture of my wife's betrayal, documented and cross-referenced like a business proposal. The only question was what to do with the information. I could confront her directly, but that would just lead to tears, denials, and promises to change that we both knew she wouldn't keep. I could file for divorce, but Massachusetts was a no-fault state, and she'd probably walk away with half of everything I'd worked to build. Or I could do what I did best, outthink my opponent and win. I was still sitting at my computer when I heard her car in the driveway at 4:30 a.m. She crept upstairs like a teenager sneaking in past curfew, slipping into our bathroom to wash off the evidence of her evening. When she finally came to bed, she lay as far away from me as possible, probably hoping I was asleep. I wasn't. I was planning. The next morning, Olivia woke up to discover that our joint credit cards had been canceled and our bank accounts frozen. Not permanently, I wasn't stupid enough to do anything illegal, but temporarily, while I investigated some suspicious charges. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving her phone at me over breakfast. She'd tried to buy coffee on her way to work and been declined. "Identity theft," I said calmly, not looking up from my newspaper. "Someone's been using our accounts for unauthorized purchases. I've got the bank investigating." "That's ridiculous. What kind of purchases?" I met her eyes for the first time since she'd walked downstairs. "Hotel rooms mostly. The Orion Hotel. Someone's been booking suites under my name." The color drained from her face so quickly I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'm sure it's just a mistake," she said weakly. "I'm sure it is." I folded my newspaper and stood up. "Don't worry. I'll get to the bottom of it." I left her standing in our kitchen, probably calculating how much cash she had in her purse and whether it would be enough to maintain her double life until she could figure out what I knew. The answer was everything, and I was just getting started. Harper Williams had been my executive assistant for 8 years, and in that time she'd proven herself to be worth her weight in gold. Smart, discreet, and blessed with the kind of organizational skills that made my chaotic business life actually function. More importantly, she was loyal, a quality that was about to become very valuable. "I need you to do some research," I told her Monday morning, closing my office door behind me. "Personal research, and it needs to stay between us." Harper looked up from her computer, her sharp blue eyes immediately alert. At 32, she had the kind of professional competence that made people underestimate how much she actually saw and understood. That was their mistake. What kind of research? I handed her a folder containing printouts of Olivia's credit card statements and phone records. My wife is having an affair. I need to know everything about it. Who, what, when, where, and most importantly, who else knows? Harper's expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Not surprise. She was too smart not to have noticed Olivia's increasingly cold treatment of me at company events. Maybe satisfaction. Harper had never liked my wife, though she'd been too professional to say so directly. How deep do you want me to go? All the way to the bottom. Social media, professional connections, mutual friends. I want to know what they're saying about me, what they're planning, and what kind of ammunition they think they have. She nodded once, crisp and efficient. Timeline? End of the week. And Harper? This is off the books. Use your personal equipment your own time. I'll compensate you appropriately. Understood. 3 days later, she knocked on my office door with a thick manila envelope and an expression that suggested I wasn't going to like what she'd found. It's worse than you thought, she said without preamble, settling into the chair across from my desk. And better, depending on how you look at it. I opened the envelope and spread the contents across my desk. Screenshots of text messages, social media posts, even what looked like transcripts of phone conversations. How did you get all this? Toby Chen from Olivia's office. He's been carrying a torch for her for years, and he's not happy about being passed over for Marcus Lane. Turns out jealousy makes people very talkative. I recognized the name. Toby was one of Olivia's junior associates, a quiet guy who'd always seemed competent, but unremarkable. Apparently, still waters ran deeper than I'd thought. What did he tell you? Harper pulled out a highlighted transcript. Olivia and Sasha have a private group chat where they discuss their affairs. Both of them are cheating on their husbands, and they've been comparing notes for months. I felt my jaw clench as I read through the messages. They were explicit, cruel, and worst of all, they were mocking. Olivia described me as pathetically clueless and joked about how easy it was to manipulate me into paying for her dates with Marcus. Sasha chimed in with her own commentary about her husband's shortcomings, and together they laughed about their stupid, boring husbands, who were too trusting to see what was happening under their noses. There's more, Harper continued. Marcus has been bragging to his friends about landing Olivia. He's got photos on his phone, nothing pornographic, but intimate enough to be embarrassing if they went public. What kind of photos? Olivia in lingerie, the two of them in bed together, selfies from their hotel room. Apparently he thinks of them as trophies. I studied the evidence spread across my desk, feeling something cold and hard crystallize in my chest. This wasn't just adultery, it was humiliation, deliberate and calculated. They weren't just betraying their marriages, they were actively mocking the people they'd promised to love and honor. What else? Olivia's been using company resources for personal business. She's been booking conference rooms for private meetings with Marcus, using company computers for personal communications, even charging personal expenses to the corporate account. Toby documented everything. Why? Harper's smile was sharp as a blade. Because he's been hoping that if Olivia got fired, he might have a chance with her. He's been building a case for months, waiting for the right moment to present it to the partners. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. Olivia thought she was untouchable, successful, beautiful, connected. She had no idea that her own colleague had been documenting her every misstep, motivated by the same kind of unrequited obsession that had probably driven her into Marcus's arms in the first place. I want copies of everything Toby has, I said. And I want you to keep monitoring the group chat. Can you do that? Already done. Toby gave me access to Olivia's work computer. As long as she stays logged in, I can see everything she sees. Good. What about Marcus? That's where it gets interesting. Harper pulled out another set of documents. Marcus Lane isn't quite as successful as he pretends to be. His luxury branding firm is hemorrhaging money, and he's been using his relationship with wealthy women to stay afloat. Olivia isn't his first married conquest, she's just the most recent. I felt a grim satisfaction settle over me. Of course, Marcus wasn't some irresistible Lothario who'd swept my wife off her feet. He was a con man, targeting successful women with more money than sense. The fact that Olivia had fallen for it said more about her judgment than his charm. What's his weakness? His reputation. Everything he has is built on image and connections. If that facade cracks, his whole world comes down. I gathered up the documents and locked them in my desk drawer. Thank you, Harper. This is exactly what I needed. What are you going to do? I looked out my office window at the Boston skyline, thinking about my wife's wedding ring sitting in my pocket and the group chat where she mocked me for sport. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. That evening, I made my first move. Marcus drove a silver Porsche Cayenne, the kind of flashy SUV that screamed, "I'm successful and want everyone to know it." He parked it in the valet lot at the Velvet Club every Thursday night, where he held court with other wannabe moguls and probably scouted for his next mark. I waited until he was inside, then approached his car with a small package I'd prepared earlier. Nothing illegal, just a piece of raw fish wrapped in plastic and secured with industrial tape under his driver's seat. By the time he found it, the smell would be embedded in his expensive leather upholstery permanently. For good measure, I also let the air out of his rear tire, not slashed, just deflated. Inconvenient, but not criminal. Then I positioned myself across the street with my phone camera ready. Marcus emerged from the club 2 hours later, slightly drunk and very pleased with himself. He handed his valet ticket to the attendant with the kind of casual arrogance that suggested he'd never experienced real consequences for his actions. That was about to change. The valet brought his car around, and Marcus climbed in without noticing the flat tire. He made it exactly half a block before the low tire pressure warning forced him to pull over. I watched through my camera as he got out, saw the flat tire, and began gesturing angrily at his phone. The smell hit him when he got back in the car to wait for roadside assistance. Even from across the street, I could see his face contort in disgust. He jumped out of the car like it was on fire, stumbling backward and nearly falling into traffic. The valet attendants were staring now, along with several other club patrons who'd come outside to see what the commotion was about. Marcus spent the next 20 minutes frantically searching his car for the source of the smell, growing more agitated and embarrassed as a small crowd gathered to watch. By the time the tow truck arrived, he was sweating through his expensive shirt and cursing loud enough to scandalize the Velvet Club's refined clientele. I got it all on video. The next morning, an anonymous tip led to the footage being posted on Boston's most popular gossip blog, along with a caption about entitled rich boys and their public meltdowns. Within hours, it had been shared hundreds of times across social media. Marcus Lane, the smooth-talking luxury branding expert, had become a laughingstock. But that was just the opening move. I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly reports and planning my next strike when Olivia called. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "About what?" "About whatever game you think you're playing." I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the tension in her voice. "I'm not playing any games, Olivia. I'm just investigating those suspicious charges on our credit cards, remember?" "Cut the shit, Daniel. I know you're behind what happened to Marcus last night." "I'm sorry, what happened to Marcus? And why would you care?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "Meet me at home. Tonight. We're going to settle this." "I'll be there," I said. "Should I pick up dinner, or will you be too busy to eat?" She hung up without answering. I smiled and went back to my quarterly reports. Let her stew for a few hours. By the time I got home, she'd be angry enough to make mistakes, and I'd be ready to capitalize on every single one of them. The underdog was about to show his teeth. Olivia was waiting for me in our living room when I got home, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, her armor for serious conversations. The wedding ring was still nowhere to be seen. "Sit down," she said the moment I walked through the door. "In my own house? How generous of you." I hung up my coat and took my time settling into my favorite armchair. "You said we needed to talk. I know what you did to Marcus. I'm afraid you'll have to be more specific. I've never done anything to Marcus Lane except shake his hand at a couple of networking events." Her eyes flashed with anger. "The car, Daniel. The fish, the flat tire, the video. Very mature." I raised my eyebrows in mock surprise. "How would you know the details of what happened to Marcus's car? Were you there?" The question hit home. Olivia's face flushed, and she stopped pacing. "He told me about it." "Really? When did you talk to him?" We work in related industries. We communicate professionally." "I see. And he called you at home to complain about his car troubles? That seems like an unusual professional relationship." Olivia sat down heavily on the couch across from me, and for the first time in months, she looked genuinely uncertain. "What do you want, Daniel?" "I want my wife back. The woman I married who wore her wedding ring and came home at night and didn't lie to me about where she'd been." "People change. Marriages evolve." "Into what? A business arrangement where you use my money to fund your affair while mocking me to your friends?" Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots Harper had provided. "Would you like me to read some of your text messages with Sasha? The ones where you call me pathetically clueless and joke about how easy it is to manipulate me?" Olivia lunged for my phone, but I held it out of reach. "How did you get those?" "The same way I got the hotel records, the credit card statements, and the photos Marcus has been taking of you. Did you really think you could carry on like this indefinitely without consequences?" She sank back onto the couch, her hands shaking. "You can't use those. They're private communications." "Nothing's private anymore, Olivia. You made sure of that when you decided to broadcast your contempt for me to anyone who would listen." "You never meant for me to find out. That's different from never meaning to do it." We stared at each other across the coffee table that had once been a symbol of our shared life. Now it felt like a negotiating table in a hostile takeover. "What do you want?" she asked again. "I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You've spent months treating me like an idiot who exists solely to fund your lifestyle while you pursue more interesting options. Now, you get to find out what happens when the idiot stops playing along." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm educating you. There's a difference." My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. "Check the gossip blog now." I opened the link she'd sent and felt a savage satisfaction spread through my chest. The Boston Society blog had just posted a new article titled "Cheating Hearts and Corporate Cards," complete with redacted screenshots of Olivia's group chat messages and documentation of her misuse of company resources. "You might want to check your phone," I told Olivia. She grabbed her cell with trembling hands, and I watched her face cycle through confusion, horror, and rage as she read the article. "This is illegal. You can't publish private communications without consent." I didn't publish anything. Anonymous sources did. And they were very careful to redact any identifying information. Legally, it's no different from any other gossip column. "My partners will know it's me." "Probably. Along with everyone else in your industry. The article's been shared 200 times in the last hour." Olivia's phone started ringing. She looked at the caller ID and declined the call, but it immediately started ringing again. "You need to stop this," she said. "I need to do exactly nothing. You created this situation, Olivia. I'm just making sure everyone gets to see the real you." "What about Marcus? What are you planning to do to him?" The concern in her voice was genuine, and it cut deeper than any of her lies had. She was worried about her lover's reputation, while her husband sat across from her, documenting the destruction of their marriage. Marcus can take care of himself. He's a big boy with a luxury branding firm and a silver tongue. I'm sure he'll figure something out. Her phone buzzed with a text, and she glanced at it reflexively. Whatever she saw made her face crumple. "He's not answering my calls," she whispered. "Smart man. He's probably trying to figure out how to distance himself from the scandal before it destroys his business. You don't understand. You what? Love each other? Give me a break, Olivia. You're a conquest to him, nothing more. A married woman with money who was stupid enough to pay for her own seduction." She started crying then, not the elegant tears of a woman seeking sympathy, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose world was collapsing in real time. I felt nothing. "I want a divorce," she said through her tears. "No." She looked up, startled. "What?" I said no. You don't get to blow up our marriage and then walk away with half of everything I've built. If you want out, you're going to have to earn it. What does that mean? I stood up and looked down at her, disheveled, crying, and suddenly very small. It means this is just the beginning. You wanted excitement, Olivia. You wanted passion and drama and a life worthy of your social media feed. Congratulations. You're about to get more than you bargained for. I left her sobbing on our couch and went upstairs to my office. There were emails waiting from Harper, updates on the fallout from the blog post, and intelligence about Marcus's increasingly desperate attempts to control the narrative around his public humiliation. But the most interesting message was from an unexpected source. Victor Reeves, Marcus Lane's business partner and self-described fixer. He wanted to meet. I smiled and started typing a response. If Marcus thought he could intimidate me through his corporate muscle, he was about to learn the same lesson Olivia was discovering. I wasn't the same man they thought they were dealing with. The mild-mannered tech consultant was gone. In his place was someone much more dangerous, someone with nothing left to lose and all the time in the world to make his enemies pay for underestimating him. Let them come. I was ready. Victor Reeves looked exactly like what he was, a corporate enforcer in an expensive suit, tall, broad-shouldered with the kind of artificial smile that never reached his eyes. He'd suggested we meet at a coffee shop in the financial district. Neutral ground, he'd called it, though I suspected he'd chosen it because he wanted witnesses for whatever threats he planned to make. "Daniel Reid," he said, extending his hand as I approached his table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Victor Reeves," I replied, matching his firm handshake. "Marcus's partner, if I'm not mistaken. Among other things," he gestured for me to sit. "I understand you've been having some difficulties with your wife. I wouldn't call them difficulties. I'd call them revelations." Victor's smile tightened. "Right. Well, sometimes these personal situations can spiral out of control if they're not handled properly. People get hurt unnecessarily." I sipped my coffee and studied his face. "Are you threatening me, Victor?" "I'm offering to help you find a solution that works for everyone involved." "How generous. What kind of solution did you have in mind?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a confidential whisper. "Marcus is willing to end his relationship with your wife immediately. Clean break, no contact. Everyone moves on with their lives. In exchange, you stop whatever campaign you're running against him." "Campaign?" "The car incident, the blog posts, the social media harassment. It needs to stop." I set down my coffee cup and looked Victor directly in the eyes. "I haven't harassed anyone. If Marcus is experiencing some professional difficulties, perhaps he should examine his own behavior rather than blaming others." "Don't play stupid, Daniel. We both know what you're doing. What I'm doing is protecting my interests. If that creates problems for Marcus, maybe he should have thought about that before he decided to fuck my wife." Victor's artificial smile disappeared entirely. "You're making a mistake. Marcus has friends in this city, powerful friends who don't appreciate having their business disrupted by bitter husbands." Is that supposed to scare me? It's supposed to make you think rationally about what's best for everyone involved. I leaned back in my chair and laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that made several other customers turn to look at us. Victor, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? You seem to think I'm some kind of victim who's going to slink away quietly if you threaten me hard enough. But here's the thing. I'm not the same man I was 6 months ago. That guy cared about being reasonable and avoiding conflict and maintaining his reputation in the business community. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. This guy doesn't give a shit about any of that. This guy has already lost everything that mattered to him, which means he has absolutely nothing left to lose. Victor's face had gone pale. You're making a serious mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting people who didn't deserve it. But I'm a fast learner, Victor, and I've learned that sometimes the only way to deal with predators is to become something they're afraid of. I left him sitting at the coffee shop and walked back to my office, feeling lighter than I had in months. Let Victor run back to Marcus with tales of the unhinged husband who wouldn't be intimidated. It would make what came next even more satisfying. Harper was waiting in my office with another envelope of intelligence. How did it go? She asked. About as expected. Marcus sent his attack dog to try to scare me off. It didn't work. Good, because I have news that's going to make you very happy. She opened the envelope and spread out a new collection of documents. Remember how I said Marcus has a pattern of targeting wealthy married women? Yes. Well, it turns out his current wife doesn't know about that pattern. Jennifer Lane thinks she's married to a successful businessman who travels frequently for work. I picked up a photograph of an attractive blonde woman in her early 30s, standing next to Marcus at what looked like a charity gala. She has no idea? None. And she has her own money, family trust fund, inherited real estate, the works. If she found out about Marcus's extracurricular activities, the divorce would destroy him financially. How do you know all this? Harper's smile was predatory. Because Jennifer Lane and I went to college together. We've stayed in touch through social media, and she's been posting about how happy she is with her devoted husband and their perfect marriage. I felt that familiar cold satisfaction settle in my chest. What else? Victor Reeves has his own vulnerabilities. He's been skimming money from their business accounts to fund a gambling addiction. Small amounts, but consistent over the past 2 years. If the right person reported it to the authorities? Or to his own wife? Exactly. Victor's wife, Sarah, thinks he's been working late to build their retirement fund. She has no idea he's been pissing it away at underground poker games. I gathered up the documents and locked them in my desk drawer with the others. The collection was getting substantial, enough ammunition to destroy both Marcus and Victor if they pushed me too far. There's one more thing, Harper said. Olivia's been trying to reach Marcus for 3 days. He's not returning her calls. Smart of him. Maybe, but she's getting desperate. Toby says she's been crying at work, making mistakes, snapping at clients. Her partners are starting to notice. Good. Let her suffer for a while. Maybe it will give her some perspective on what she's thrown away. That evening, I was working late in my home office when I heard Olivia's car in the driveway. She'd been staying at Sasha's house since our confrontation 3 days ago, probably hoping I'd cool down and become reasonable again. She was about to be disappointed. I heard her moving around downstairs, opening and closing drawers, probably looking for important documents or valuables she could take with her. After about an hour, she knocked on my office door. Come in. She looked terrible, red-eyed, pale, wearing the same clothes she'd had on yesterday. We need to talk. We talked 3 days ago. You said you wanted a divorce. I've changed my mind. I looked up from my computer. Oh. This has gone far enough, Daniel. The blog posts, the gossip, whatever you did to Marcus, it needs to stop. What I did to Marcus, I haven't done anything to Marcus. His business is falling apart. His clients are dropping him, his partners are asking questions. His wife... She stopped abruptly. His wife what? Olivia's face crumpled. She knows. Someone sent her photos of Marcus with other women. She's filing for divorce. I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Harper worked fast. That's unfortunate, I said, but I fail to see what it has to do with me. You're destroying innocent people to get revenge on me. I'm not destroying anyone. I'm simply making sure the truth comes to light. If that destroys people, maybe they shouldn't have been living lies. Jennifer Lane never did anything to you. Neither did I to Jennifer Lane. But her husband decided to fuck my wife, so now she gets to know what kind of man she married. Seems fair to me. Olivia sank into the chair across from my desk. What do you want? Money? The house? I'll give you whatever you want if you'll just stop this. I want my wedding ring back. She looked confused. What? My wedding ring. The one you took off because it didn't match your dress. I want it back. It's in the bathroom. On the counter. No, it's not. I checked. Where is it, Olivia? Her face went white. I don't remember. Did you throw it away? Sell it? Give it to Marcus as some kind of trophy? I would never... Where is my wedding ring? She started crying again. I lost it. I'm sorry, I lost it somewhere and I didn't know how to tell you. I stared at her for a long moment, feeling something final and irreversible settle into place. The ring had been a symbol of our marriage, and she'd lost it the same way she'd lost everything else, through carelessness and selfishness and a complete inability to value what she had. Get out, I said quietly. Daniel, please. Get out of my house, now. This is my house too. Not anymore. Check your email. My lawyer sent you the paperwork an hour ago. You have 30 days to remove your belongings. She stared at me in shock. You can't do that. I can, and I did. The house is in my name, purchased before we were married. According to Massachusetts law, it's not marital property. I'll fight you. With what money? Your credit cards are canceled, your bank accounts are frozen, and your business partners are probably going to fire you within the week. Good luck finding a lawyer who'll take your case on contingency. Olivia stood up unsteadily, her face streaked with tears and mascara. You've changed. You're not the man I married. You're right, I said, turning back to my computer. I'm better. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, the sound of her gathering a few essentials, and finally the front door slamming behind her. Then silence. I sat in my office for a long time after she left, thinking about wedding rings and broken promises and the price of trusting the wrong people. Tomorrow I would put the final pieces of my plan into motion. Marcus and Victor thought they could intimidate me into backing down, but they'd made the same mistake Olivia had. They'd underestimated exactly how far I was willing to go to make them pay. The chase was nearly finished. Soon, it would be time for the final strike. The Orion Hotel's penthouse suite had been the scene of my wife's betrayal for 3 months. It seemed fitting that it would also be the scene of her destruction. I'd spent 2 weeks planning this moment, coordinating with Harper to ensure every detail was perfect. The invitation had gone out to 50 of Boston's most influential business leaders, social media personalities, and gossip columnists, advertising an exclusive industry networking event with premium cocktails and surprising revelations about corporate ethics. Marcus and Olivia thought they were attending a legitimate business function. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. I arrived early to oversee the setup. The suite was elegant, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor, marble floors, crystal chandeliers. Harper had arranged for professional lighting and discreet cameras positioned to capture every angle of the room. This wasn't going to be some grainy cell phone video that could be dismissed or explained away. This was going to be broadcast quality. Everything's ready, Harper said, checking her tablet. The live stream is set up, the guest list is confirmed, and our special guests should be arriving any minute. Special guests? Jennifer Lane and Sarah Reeves. I thought they deserved front-row seats for what's about to happen to their husbands. I felt a grim smile tug at the corners of my mouth. Harper had outdone herself. The first guests began arriving at 7 o'clock. Reporters, bloggers, business executives, and socialites who'd been drawn by the promise of exclusive gossip and premium alcohol. I worked the room like the consummate host I'd learned to be over 15 years of corporate networking, making sure everyone felt welcome and slightly curious about what they were about to witness. Marcus arrived at 7:30, looking confident and polished in his expensive suit. He'd recovered some of his swagger since the car incident, probably convinced that he'd weathered the worst of the storm. He had no idea the hurricane was just beginning. Olivia walked in 10 minutes later, clearly nervous but trying to project her usual air of sophisticated competence. She'd lost weight over the past 2 weeks. Stress and guilt were apparently effective diet aids. She spotted me across the room and froze, her face going pale as she realized she'd been set up. Too late to run now. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, tapping my champagne glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for joining me this evening. I know you're wondering why I've brought you together, so let me get straight to the point." The room fell silent. 50 pairs of eyes focused on me, with the kind of anticipation that came from sensing blood in the water. 3 months ago, I discovered that my wife Olivia was having an affair with Marcus Lane, a luxury branding consultant who specializes in targeting wealthy married women for financial and personal exploitation. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several people turned to stare at Olivia, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. Rather than confront them directly, I decided to conduct a thorough investigation into their activities. What I discovered was far worse than simple adultery. I gestured to Harper, who activated the large screen mounted on the suite's main wall. Screenshots of text messages appeared, the group chat between Olivia and Sasha, with their cruel commentary about their stupid husbands highlighted in yellow. My wife and her best friend have been conducting a systematic campaign of emotional and financial abuse against their spouses, documenting their cruelty in writing and sharing it for entertainment. More gasps from the audience. I could see reporters frantically taking notes, while social media influencers live-streamed the presentation to their followers. But that's not all. Olivia has been embezzling company funds to finance her affair, using corporate resources for personal business, and violating her fiduciary duty to her business partners. The next slide showed bank records and credit card statements, with Olivia's fraudulent charges clearly documented. Marcus Lane, meanwhile, has built his entire business model around seducing and exploiting married women with access to wealth. Olivia is just his most recent victim, and I use that term loosely, since she was a willing participant in her own destruction. I turned to face Marcus directly. "Would you like to explain to your wife Jennifer how many other married women you've been sleeping with? She's here tonight, by the way. Front row blonde hair looks absolutely devastated." Marcus's face went from confident to terrified in the space of a heartbeat. He spun around, searching the crowd until he spotted Jennifer Lane sitting near the windows, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the evidence of her husband's betrayal displayed on the giant screen. "This is illegal," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "You can't." "I can, and I am. Everything you're seeing tonight is documented fact, obtained through legal means and presented in a public forum. If you don't like it, feel free to sue me." I clicked to the next slide, which showed financial records from Marcus's business accounts. Of course, you might have trouble affording a lawyer once your wife divorces you and your business partner Victor discovers that you've been stealing from the company to fund your lifestyle. Victor Reeves, who'd been standing near the bar trying to look invisible, suddenly found himself in the spotlight as his own financial crimes appeared on screen. "Victor's been skimming money from their accounts to pay gambling debts," I continued conversationally. "His wife Sarah is here tonight too. She's the brunette in the blue dress who's currently staring at her husband like she's never seen him before." The room had gone completely silent, except for the sound of cameras clicking and fingers typing on phones. This was the kind of scandal that would dominate Boston's social media for weeks. Now, you might be wondering why I've gone to all this trouble instead of simply filing for divorce and moving on with my life. The answer is simple. These people destroyed my marriage for sport. They mocked me, stole from me, and treated me like a fool who deserved whatever they chose to do to him. I walked over to where Olivia stood frozen near the entrance, her face streaked with tears and mascara. You wanted excitement, Olivia. You wanted passion and drama and a life worthy of your Instagram feed. You wanted to feel superior to your boring, predictable husband who loved you enough to trust you completely. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I bought this for our anniversary next month, a new wedding ring to replace the one you lost, but I realized something while I was planning tonight's festivities. I opened the box, revealing a beautiful diamond band that had cost me more than my first car. You never deserved the first ring, and you sure as hell don't deserve this one. I walked over to the suite's balcony door and stepped outside. The wind off Boston Harbor was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of salt water and approaching winter. This ring represents 15 years of my life that I'll never get back. 15 years of loving someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenient source of funding for her real life. I held the ring up so everyone could see it, then drew back my arm and hurled it as far as I could into the harbor below. Consider that my final gift to you, Olivia, the last thing I'll ever give you that you don't deserve. I walked back into the suite to find chaos. Olivia was sobbing hysterically, while reporters shouted questions at her. Marcus was trying to push through the crowd toward the exit, while his wife screamed at him in front of a dozen cameras. Victor was on his phone, probably calling his lawyer, while his wife Sarah sat in stunned silence, staring at the evidence of his betrayal. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, raising my voice over the commotion. "Thank you for attending this evening's presentation. The bar remains open for another hour, and I encourage you to stay and network. After all, Boston's business community is a small world, and it's important to know who you can trust." I walked through the crowd toward the exit, accepting handshakes and business cards from people who clearly saw me as someone worth knowing. The mild-mannered tech consultant was gone forever, replaced by someone who'd proven he could be more ruthless than any of them when the situation called for it. Harper fell into step beside me as we reached the elevator. "How do you feel?" she asked. I looked back at the chaos I'd created, at my wife's destroyed reputation, her lover's ruined marriage, and the smoking wreckage of the conspiracy that had treated me like a fool. "Like I can finally sleep at night," I said. The elevator doors closed on the sound of Olivia's sobs and Marcus's desperate explanations. By tomorrow morning, video clips from tonight would be all over social media. By next week, none of them would be able to show their faces in Boston's business community. I'd given them exactly what they'd given me: public humiliation, financial ruin, and the knowledge that their actions had consequences they'd never anticipated. The only difference was that they'd deserved it. As we walked out of the Orion Hotel into the cold Boston night, I felt lighter than I had in years. The wedding ring was gone, along with the naive man who'd bought it. In their place was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who mistook his kindness for weakness. Olivia had been right about one thing. I wasn't the man she'd married. I was better.